lied and used fake documents to obtain the interview with my mother, made lurid and false claims about the royal family, which played on her fears and fueled paranoia.
Ever since she stepped into the royal spotlight, Princess Diana's extraordinary life and enduring legacy have held the world spellbound. Known universally as the People's Princess, her boundless empathy, effortless elegance, and genuine warmth forged an unbreakable bond with the public. Yet, hidden beneath the glittering tiaras and relentless flashes of the paparazzi, she was, first and foremost, a fiercely devoted mother who loved her boys beyond measure. Now, after decades shrouded in mystery, a forgotten, highly personal letter from Diana to her eldest son, Prince William, has finally surfaced. What urgent message did she leave behind for the future king? Stay with us as we dive deep into the startling revelations of Princess Diana's long-lost letter to Prince William and the explosive royal secrets hidden within its pages. The story didn't start with breaking news or a flashy press conference. Instead, it emerged quietly in the summer of 2004, tucked away in the catalogue of a London auction house. There were no bold headlines, merely a modest listing for a collection of handwritten notes by the late Princess of Wales. But these were no ordinary documents. They were intensely intimate, providing an unvarnished and unfiltered glimpse into her closely guarded private universe. Among the trove, one specific letter immediately caught everyone's attention. It detailed her deep affection for her firstborn, Prince William, laying bare the profound bond they shared. This auction showcased Diana's private exchanges with Violet Collison, a woman who was far more than just household staff. For decades, Violet had served as a fiercely loyal confidant to the Spencer family. Violet had a front-row seat to Diana's evolution from a timid teenager into a global icon, and these pages documented every step of that extraordinary path. In stark contrast to the heavily sanitized and meticulously crafted statements released by the palace, Diana's letters were thrillingly raw. They chronicled her emotional turbulence, the suffocating weight of royal expectations, the staggering stress of a globally televised royal wedding, and, most importantly, the profound joys and deep anxieties of being a mother. Take, for instance, a remarkably sweet note penned on July 8, 1981, merely weeks before she walked down the aisle to marry Prince Charles. It perfectly captured a young bride navigating a storm of last-minute wedding panic. Yet, amid the madness, Diana maintained a cheeky, light-hearted spirit, writing, "Everyone's racing around here, fixing up last-minute stuff, but the bride's keeping her cool." That little quip perfectly showcased the down-to-earth charm that the public so adored. However, as the fairy tale faded and the years rolled on, the tone of her writing darkened. The breathless excitement of a teenage princess was eventually replaced by heavier realities, creeping frustration, quiet worries, and, above all else, an absolute, fierce dedication to her two boys. What makes this correspondence so breathtaking isn't merely the ink on the page, but the raw maternal instinct bleeding through. They expose a woman consumed by thoughts of her sons' futures, their emotional health, and their ultimate happiness. While the public consumed Diana through curated photo shoots, scandalous tell-alls, and explosive TV interviews, these handwritten notes were an entirely different beast. They were never meant for public consumption. They were whispered confessions, proving her desperate desire to raise her boys with genuine empathy, a trait notoriously difficult to preserve behind the cold, imposing walls of the palace. A deeply moving note from June 21, 1989, illustrates this perfectly, written on official Kensington Palace letterhead. Diana reached out to Sergeant George Plum of the Special Escort Group to thank him for putting on a thrilling motorbike show for William's 7th birthday. Diana's genuine appreciation shines through as she wrote, "It was so nice of you and your team to come here today for William's birthday. I can't even tell you how much joy the show brought to all those kids and their moms." But the true magic of this letter lies at the bottom. It wasn't just signed by the princess. Right next to her name were the clumsy, enthusiastic scribbles of a young William and Harry. It's a beautifully ordinary snapshot of a happy family, completely shielded from the glaring lenses of the paparazzi and the scrutiny of the press. For royal watchers, these artifacts are much more than nostalgic treasures. They reignited fierce debates over Diana's fractured dynamic with the monarchy and her stubborn refusal to raise her children the royal way. Breaking free from generations of emotionally distant royal parenting and strict protocol, Diana completely shattered the mold. She was desperate for William and Harry to experience a tangible, normal childhood, identical to the kids living outside the royal bubble. As her former protection officer, Ken Worf, recalled, Diana went out of her way to expose them to reality. She dragged them to thrilling amusement parks, let them gorge on fast food, and even hopped on standard public buses. These weren't calculated PR stunts. This was a mother trying to ensure her future king knew what the real world actually looked like. But did Princess Diana ultimately succeed in keeping her boys grounded in reality while navigating the ultimate royal fishbowl? Let's dive deeper into the truth. Princess Diana was so much more than a figurehead in a glittering tiara. At her core, she was a fiercely dedicated mother, desperate to ensure William and Harry experienced a world far beyond the gilded cages of Kensington Palace. She firmly believed that, despite their royal blood, her boys needed to understand the gritty realities of everyday life. Diana intentionally orchestrated outings where they could mingle with ordinary people, fighting tooth and nail to keep them from growing up completely isolated in a bubble of extreme privilege. Yet, navigating this was a treacherous tightrope walk. Knowing the suffocating and often ruthless nature of the paparazzi, she guarded her sons like a lioness. She struck a fragile, calculated bargain with the press, coordinating official photo ops for major milestones, like a first day of school or a family holiday, but demanding strict privacy in return. It was a high-stakes game of give and take. She fed the public's insatiable curiosity just enough to buy her boys a fighting chance at a normal childhood. As royal biographer Andrew Morton detailed in his explosive book, Diana, Her True Story, the media's relentless intrusion was a source of deep, ongoing agony for her. Having been burned by that harsh spotlight herself, she was terrified of the psychological toll it could take on a child. Her private letters concerning William were never just polite updates. They were the visceral, heartfelt testaments of a mother meticulously preparing her future king for his heavy destiny, all while trying to shield him from the world's ugliest realities. By the time these intimate notes went to auction in 2004, that little boy was a young man navigating university, actively embodying the very lessons Diana had fought to teach him. Dripping with maternal pride and hard-won wisdom, the letters offered a profound look at how deeply she had shaped his character. This revelation arrived while the public was still nursing the fresh wound of her passing, just 7 years after that fatal crash in Paris. With the monarchy still reeling from the shockwaves she had created, a rapidly maturing William was increasingly viewed as the true inheritor of Diana's emotional legacy. But reading these notes is undeniably heartbreaking. They serve as a cruel reminder of the milestones stolen from her. Diana was robbed of the chance to see her boys become men, to watch them walk down the aisle, and to see them champion the philanthropic causes she so deeply valued. Still, through the stroke of a pen, her spirit endured. Not through stiff, palace-approved speeches, but through her own warm, unapologetic words. What started as a simple auction transformed into a global moment of remembrance, allowing the world to feel the undeniable pulse of Diana's love for William once again. Ultimately, Diana's legacy as a mother isn't merely preserved in ink or faded photographs. It's etched into the daily, deliberate choices she made. Some were loud, headline-making rebellions. Others were quiet, subversive acts of defiance against rigid royal protocol. But strip away the titles, the drama, and the crown, and you're left with one undeniable truth. Before William and Harry belonged to the world, they belonged to an extraordinary mother. She knew all too well that the crushing weight of the crown came attached to their privilege, and she was hell-bent on arming them with more than just fancy titles. But did her revolutionary approach to royal parenting actually succeed in instilling the character and compassion she so desperately hoped for? Let's find out. On a momentous summer day, June 21, 1982, a mere 20-year-old Princess Diana welcomed her firstborn, Prince William, into the world. This wasn't just another royal obligation to check off a list. It was an instant, soul-deep transformation. While generations of royal mothers before her were historically content to be distant, waving figures, Diana ripped up the rulebook entirely. She plunged headfirst into motherhood, treating it not as a duty, but as her ultimate life's mission. She shattered centuries of stuffy protocol right out of the gate. She insisted on breastfeeding William, a practice virtually abandoned by the modern royal family, and boldly demanded to choose his name herself rather than letting the firm dictate it. More shockingly, she point-blank refused to surrender her baby to an army of palace nannies. Her absolute defiance was on full display when Prince Charles was scheduled for a massive royal tour of Australia just weeks after William's birth. Instead of leaving her infant behind with the staff, as was the rigid royal standard, Diana packed him up and brought him along. It was a loud, undeniable statement to the monarchy. Her child would always outrank her royal obligations. As William grew, so did Diana's quiet rebellion. Bypassing the traditional, isolated world of private palace tutors, she boldly enrolled the future king in a standard local nursery school right outside Kensington Palace. Imagine the sheer shock of ordinary parents spotting the Princess of Wales casually doing the morning school drop-off and pick-up. It was unprecedented in royal history. But this was more than just a fleeting moment of independence. It was a full-blown revolution in how the monarchy raised its heirs. And her crusade for normalcy didn't end at the school gates. Diana was hell-bent on ensuring William and his younger brother, Harry, tasted real life beyond the velvet ropes and gilded cages. Their childhood wasn't restricted to stiff state banquets and tedious royal engagements. Instead, she sneaked them out to McDonald's, not for the love of fast food, but because she desperately wanted her boys to feel like regular kids. She dragged them onto the sweaty London Underground, threw them into the thrilling chaos of public theme parks, and deliberately placed them in crowds where no one was bowing, curtsying, or calling them Your Royal Highness. According to her former protection officer, Ken Worf, these weren't just spontaneous fun days, they were highly orchestrated life lessons. She would meticulously plan these outings during off-peak hours, strip back her security detail, and sometimes even throw on a clever disguise just to blend into the crowd unnoticed. Through these covert adventures, Diana wasn't just handing them a fun childhood, she was actively hardwiring them with empathy. This mission reached its peak when she began bringing her boys along to her gritty charity engagements. In one profoundly moving instance, she took a young William to Centrepoint, a London charity for the homeless. There, the future king stood face to face with kids his own age who had no families, no schools, and no beds to sleep in. She wasn't trying to scare him, she was forcing him to grasp the monumental responsibility that came attached to his unimaginable privilege. Through sheer stubborn love and a blatant disregard for outdated palace traditions, Diana didn't just tweak royal parenting, she completely obliterated the old system and rebuilt it from scratch. But behind closed doors, just how deep did this extraordinary bond with her boys truly run? Let's uncover the truth. As the 1990s dawned, the fairy tale was officially dead. The world watched in morbid fascination as Diana and Charles's marriage publicly and painfully imploded. Yet, surrounded by toxic palace politics, vicious tabloid rumors, and her own crushing heartbreak, Diana found her absolute sanctuary in just one place: her two boys. Now, more desperate than ever to protect William and Harry from the royal crossfire, she threw her entire soul into being their mother. Every parenting move she made was calculated to shield them from the chaos. She ruthlessly bypassed traditional royal institutions, handpicking Wetherby and Ludgrove schools famous for their nurturing, fiercely private environments, and she didn't just drop them off at the gates. Diana constantly collaborated with the teachers, desperate to guarantee that, at least inside the classroom, her sons could breathe and just be normal kids. When the official royal separation hit the press in 1992, the nightmare of co-parenting in the ultimate global fishbowl became a reality. Despite the media circus, Diana refused to miss a beat in her boys' everyday lives. She was the mom screaming from the sidelines at sports days, showing up to school plays, and penning heartfelt thank you cards to the staff, tiny acts of grace that proved her royal status would never eclipse her role as a mother. Today, those same handwritten notes fetch fortunes at auction, preserving the legacy of a deeply devoted parent. Then came 1995. In that explosive, earth-shattering panorama interview with Martin Bashir, 22 million jaws dropped as Diana single-handedly dismantled the flawless royal facade. But if you look closely, her ultimate agenda was clear: William and Harry. She brazenly declared her mission to raise them with love, resilience, and emotional intelligence, loudly prioritizing their humanity over dusty royal protocol. It was a massive, rebellious moment. Almost immediately, Queen Elizabeth II stepped in, ordering the couple to officially divorce. The firm had reached its absolute breaking point. According to her former butler, Paul Burrell, Diana was utterly shattered by the decree. She reportedly felt violently shoved out and silenced by the institution. Yet, as the palace gates slammed shut behind her, her sons remained her lifeline, keeping her grounded through the ultimate storm. When the divorce was finalized in August 1996, the palace stripped Diana of her Royal Highness title. It was a vicious blow not because she craved the VIP status, but because of a devastating royal rule without the HRH. A mother would technically have to curtsy to her own children. When a heartbroken Diana explained this reality to a 14-year-old William, his reported response was breathtaking. "Don't worry, Mummy, I will give it back to you one day when I am king." Though never officially confirmed by the palace, that heartbreaking promise perfectly captures the fierce, unshakable devotion between them. Stripped of her royal restrictions, a liberated Diana pivoted her massive influence toward the trenches fighting homelessness, breaking the stigma around HIV, and bravely walking through active landmine fields. She was no longer representing the crown, she was representing herself. But even as a global humanitarian superstar, her private letters told the real story. In almost every note she dashed off to friends and staff. She obsessed over her boys, gushing over William's gentle soul and Harry's chaotic, boundless energy. She poured out her terror over the crushing royal pressure awaiting them, desperately hoping they would survive the system with their integrity and independence intact. Diana knew she couldn't rewrite their royal destiny, but she knew she could arm them for the road ahead. Through her relentless love, rebellious choices, and candid words, she gifted her sons the ultimate armor the monarchy never could: genuine empathy, raw courage, and the sheer audacity to be their own men. For Diana, parenting was never about duty or tradition. It was about showing up. It was about tucking her boys in at night, speaking the hard truths even when it was dangerous, and loving them in a way that the crown could never touch. The year 1992 brought the bombshell announcement of Charles and Diana's official separation, instantly shifting the trajectory of her life forever. The atmosphere inside Kensington Palace changed overnight. Though she and Charles were no longer under the same roof, her fierce dedication to raising William and Harry only intensified. With William at the tender age of 10 and Harry just 8, their desperate need for a stable, loving anchor was her absolute focus. She micromanaged their daily schedules, diving headfirst into their school routines and weekend getaways. But as the entire globe watched the royal fairy tale burn to the ground, Diana started speaking her truth. The drama reached a boiling point on June 29, 1994, when Prince Charles made the jaw-dropping decision to confess his infidelity on national television. Diana wasn't about to stay silent. Less than a year later, in November 1995, she fired back with that nuclear BBC Panorama interview. Over 38 mesmerizing minutes, she laid bare the suffocating reality of the monarchy, her private battles with mental health, and her crippling isolation. Yet, the moments that truly captivated audiences were her raw, vulnerable confessions about her boys. She made it crystal clear she didn't just want heirs trained in stiff protocol, she wanted men raised with deep emotional intelligence. She demanded that they comprehend the real-world struggles of everyday people. Her powerful message captivated over 22 million British viewers. But inside the palace walls, her brazen honesty triggered a massive royal earthquake. The firm's retaliation was swift and absolute. Backed by the Prime Minister and the Archbishop of Canterbury, Queen Elizabeth II issued a direct, undeniable command: Charles and Diana must officially divorce. Royal historians and insiders, including Tina Brown, noted that this mandate utterly crushed Diana. Her close confidant and former butler, Paul Burrell, later exposed that she had merely wanted breathing room, not a total excommunication from the royal fold. But the wheels were already in motion. Following grueling, months-long battles over money, estates, and custody, the marriage was legally terminated on August 28, 1996. This divorce wasn't just a piece of paper, it completely stripped Diana of her royal standing. While she kept the title of Princess of Wales, the palace ruthlessly revoked her Royal Highness styling. In the brutal world of royal protocol, this meant the mother of the future king would technically have to bow to her ex-husband, the senior royals, and even her own children. It wasn't just a rule, it was a deeply symbolic, humiliating slap in the face. Diana viewed it as the ultimate rejection, a door permanently slammed shut. Burrell shared a gut-wrenching story from this dark period, seeing his mother completely shattered. A 14-year-old Prince William stepped up to comfort her. He reportedly told her, "Don't worry, Mummy, I'll give it back to you one day when I am king." The palace has never officially verified that tear-jerking promise, but it perfectly encapsulates the profound, unbreakable connection between mother and son. Cast out from the firm, Diana boldly launched her next era, dictated by her own moral compass. Not a royal handbook, she dramatically slashed her patronages from over 100 down to a select few that truly ignited her passion, pouring her heart into organizations like Centrepoint, Great Ormond Street Hospital, and the National AIDS Trust. Her global humanitarian impact exploded, even without the crown's backing. Yet, no matter how famous she became on the world stage, William and Harry always came first. She fiercely guarded her time, building her entire schedule around their school activities, showing up for parent-teacher conferences, and staying stubbornly hands-on. Insiders and school staff remember her as an incredibly present, fiercely loving mom. But behind closed doors, her newfound freedom was tainted by a growing sense of isolation. Stripped of the palace's ironclad security detail, She felt completely exposed to the elements. Her private letters from this era are chilling. In a notoriously dark note from October 1995, later leaked by Burrell, a terrified Diana predicted her own tragic fate. "This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, and serious head injury." While experts have verified her handwriting, the terrifying claims within the letter remain a subject of fierce debate. But justified or not, the words reveal a woman drowning in anxiety, feeling hunted and unsafe. Yet, even paralyzed by fear, Diana refused to stop changing the world. In January 1997, she famously marched through a partially cleared minefield in Angola with the Red Cross. Those iconic images of the People's Princess in a ballistic vest are forever burned into history, a testament to her sheer guts and her genius in weaponizing her fame to save lives. In what would tragically be her final months, Diana was obsessed with arming William and Harry for the heavy burdens ahead. She hammered home the idea that true royal power wasn't about dominance, it was about service. Insiders reveal how she constantly coached William, telling him to use your position to help those who have no voice. Devastatingly, she never got to see those lessons fully bloom. On August 31st, 1997, the unthinkable happened. Diana's life was violently extinguished in that horrific Paris car crash. The globe wept in shock as two shattered boys, just 15 and 12, made that agonizing walk behind her coffin. But even in death, her legacy courses unmistakably through her sons. What are your thoughts on these explosive revelations and the terrifying secret letter Diana left behind? Drop your opinions in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into the untold drama of the royal family, hit that like button and subscribe. You think you already know everything about Catherine Middleton? The woman who always appears with a perfect smile, a calm demeanor, and a flawless image in front of the public. But pause for a second and look more closely. The moment she looked straight into the camera in the video, announcing her cancer, was not just a statement. It was a crack. A moment when the seemingly impenetrable royal mask trembled. Amid the relentless clicking of cameras and the endless whispers behind the curtain of power, what lies behind that composed gaze? Is it the vulnerability of a woman swept into the harsh machinery of the monarchy? Or is it the cold calculation of a strategist who understands every move she makes? Details that once seemed insignificant are now beginning to connect. A subtle touch of the hand on the red carpet that made observers question. A medical record kept unusually private. And deep within the discreet corridors of the palace are silent confrontations, where a single glance can be sharper than any official statement. Have we been misled by an image carefully constructed over many years? Or is Catherine herself deliberately rewriting her own story in a way no one noticed in time? As the public hesitates between sympathy and suspicion, a question is becoming clearer than ever. Is Kate a helpless victim of a ruthless system? Or is she a woman of steel, patient and ambitious enough to quietly move step by step toward the throne? If you believe she is a victim, comment number 1. If you think this is a carefully calculated game of power, leave number 2. If the moment in the announcement video was the first crack, then the changes in Catherine's appearance are the clearest signs that a transformation is underway. What makes it striking is that this transformation is not loud, not publicly gauche, but subtle, controlled, and therefore far more dangerous. For many years, the image of Catherine Middleton was almost framed within a standard, so perfect it felt unreal. Carefully styled curls, neutral makeup that never strayed, outfits selected down to the smallest detail, and most importantly, absolute adherence to the unwritten rules of the royal family. And then, everything began to change in ways only the most attentive observers could notice. One of the first signs was her hairstyle. No longer the familiar elaborate curls, Catherine began appearing with a slightly undone bun. A messy bun that seemed simple but carried a very different meaning within the royal context. In an environment where every detail must be controlled, this intentional imperfection became a statement. It says she is no longer completely bound by rigid standards. It says she is allowing herself to be who she is, even if only in a small way. But that is only the surface. The most controversial detail, and the one that nearly stirred observers into a frenzy, was her nail color. For more than 70 years, female members of the royal family have almost exclusively worn pale, neutral, or nearly transparent shades. This rule was never officially written, yet it was followed almost absolutely, as a symbol of elegance and control. And then Catherine appeared with red nails, a red that cannot be ignored, a red that cannot be dismissed as accidental. This is no longer fashion. This is a message. In the language of imagery, red has always been associated with power, confidence, and sometimes rebellion. When Catherine chose this color in a context where every small detail carries symbolic meaning, she was not just changing her style, she was sending a signal that she is ready to break rules that have existed for decades, a signal that she no longer accepts the role of a fully controlled figure. But if it had stopped there, perhaps things would not have become so tense. The moment that truly made observers question everything was the coronation, a ceremony of the highest symbolic importance, where every detail is prepared according to centuries of tradition. And in that moment, Catherine did something no one expected. She did not wear a crown. For more than 70 years, no royal consort had ever broken this rule at an event of such magnitude. Wearing a tiara is not merely a matter of jewelry. It is a symbol of status, of inheritance, of accepting and continuing royal tradition. And Catherine refused it. Some believe it was simply a modern stylistic choice. Others see it as a generational shift. But those who understand the power structure within the monarchy see something else. It was a refusal. Not a refusal of the position, but a refusal of the way that position is defined. When Catherine stepped out without a crown, she did not diminish her presence. On the contrary, she drew even more attention to herself. And in that moment, a question began to take shape in the public mind. Was she breaking the rules, or creating new ones? The changes in her appearance, from her hairstyle, to her nail color, to the absence of a crown, when viewed together, are no longer isolated details. They form a deliberate sequence of actions, a carefully constructed image strategy, built step by step, slow enough to avoid immediate shock, yet clear enough to create an undercurrent. And it is that undercurrent that is most significant. Because within the monarchy, power does not lie only in official statements. It lies in symbols, in images, in what is left unsaid yet understood by all. Catherine does not need to stand before the press and declare that she wants change. She only needs to appear in a way that cannot be ignored. And she has done exactly that. The question is, why now? Why, after years of near absolute adherence, has she begun to change? Is it the result of accumulated pressure, or is it the sign of a new phase, where she feels strong enough to no longer perform perfection? Another, more daring theory suggests that this is not a reaction. It is a calculated move. That Catherine is not merely adapting to the system. She is gradually reshaping it. And if that is true, then what we are witnessing is not just a change in style, it is the beginning of a transfer of soft power, where image becomes a tool, and every small detail is a move in a larger game. The public may see a shade of nail polish, but inside the palace, those who understand the rules of the game see a signal that Catherine Middleton is no longer just a character in the royal story. She is becoming the one who rewrites it. But if the changes in appearance are the outward signals, then behind the gates of Kensington Palace, a very different story is unfolding in silence. A story without stage lights, without rehearsed smiles, but filled with the fractures of a marriage carrying the weight of an entire institution. In the public imagination, the marriage of William and Catherine is a perfect model, a love story that began at university, a fairy tale wedding, and 3 children as charming as if they stepped out of a painting. But the reality behind closed doors is far more complex. Sources close to the inner circle, though rare and tightly controlled, are enough to sketch a picture marked by more cracks than most would expect. The first pressure comes from fame itself. Unlike ordinary couples, they do not have the privilege of arguing in private. Every glance, every gesture, every joint appearance is examined down to the smallest detail. And when a relationship is placed under such constant scrutiny, even the smallest disagreements can be magnified into major confrontations. There have been whispers, passed quietly within insider circles, of arguments so intense they seemed beyond control. Moments when emotions broke free from every royal standard, voices raised, objects thrown in anger. No one has confirmed it officially, and perhaps no one ever will. But prolonged silence can sometimes be the strongest indication that something is being concealed. What is striking is that these conflicts are not merely personal. They are the result of a system where personal emotion must always yield to public image. William, who grew up amid the tragedy of his parents, carries wounds that have never fully healed. Catherine, who entered the royal family with careful preparation, yet remained an outsider, has had to learn to navigate rules that were never written. 2 individuals, 2 worlds, colliding in a space where there is no room for error. And then, in the year 2012, an incident occurred that changed everything in a way that could not be undone. Photographs of Catherine, taken without consent during a private holiday, were published in the press. It was not just a media scandal. It was a shock. For Catherine, it was a profound violation of privacy, a deeply personal moment exposed to the entire world, a sense of betrayal, not only by those who took the photographs, but by the very system she had become part of. Because in the royal world, privacy is always fragile. William reacted fiercely. His anger was not directed only at the media, but carried the weight of past trauma. The image of his mother, pursued relentlessly by photographers, seemed to return in that moment. And this time, the one hurt was his wife. They took the case to court. It was a long, intense, and closely watched legal battle. Ultimately, the court ruled in favor of compensation, totaling £1.3 million. It was a staggering figure. A legal victory, an assertion that they would not remain silent in the face of intrusion. But money cannot erase what has already happened. The psychological scars left by that event are immeasurable. It changed the way Catherine perceives the world around her. It made her more cautious, more private, and perhaps tougher. It also affected the relationship between her and William, because in such situations, the question is not just who was wrong, but who failed to protect whom. Whether William did enough to protect Catherine, or whether the very system he is a part of made that impossible. From that moment, a subtle change began to emerge. Catherine was no longer just the woman smiling for the cameras. She became more controlled in her appearances, more careful in every action, and perhaps more distant from the very world she lives in. The fragments never completely disappear. They are merely rearranged skillfully so that no one can see them clearly. But for those who observe long enough and deep enough, the signs are always there. In a fleeting glance, in the small gap between the two when they stand side by side, in the way they interact, which at times feels more forced than before. Royal marriage is not a fairy tale. It is a complex arrangement of affection, duty, and power. And in that arrangement, no one can be completely free. Catherine may be rewriting her public image, but inside, she still faces relentless pressure. William may be the heir to the throne, but he is also a husband, a man who must balance the past and the present. And when those two worlds collide, cracks are inevitable. The question is not whether they have conflicts. The question is how they handle those conflicts while the whole world is watching. Because in the royal family, silence does not mean nothing is happening. It simply means everything is being kept more private. Royal marriage does not only have roses. It also has thorns, and sometimes those thorns come from the very people of the same bloodline. If the fragments within a marriage are a battle behind closed doors, then outside, Catherine is entering another front, equally complex and dangerous, a war without gunfire. But every look, every standing position, every small gesture carries the weight of power, and in that war, she faces not only public opinion, but also the most powerful women in her husband's family. The relationship between Catherine and Queen Camilla has long been described by a familiar but meaningful phrase: polite on the surface but cold underneath. Outwardly, they always appear together with standard courtesy. The smiles, the nods, the brief moments of exchange before the cameras are all perfectly controlled. But for long-time observers, the coldness hidden behind those rituals is almost impossible to hide completely. Camilla is a person who spent decades earning her current position. She entered the royal family with a controversial past, once fiercely opposed by the public, and had to rebuild her image step by step. Catherine is the opposite. She entered with almost absolute support, quickly becoming a beloved icon, not only in Britain but around the world. And it is that contrast that has created an underlying current that is difficult to reconcile. In a system where image equals power, the level of popularity is not just a personal matter, it is a form of influence, a form of soft power. And Catherine, with her natural charisma and ability to connect with the public, possesses a kind of power that not everyone in the royal family can achieve. Whether there is jealousy or not, no one confirms, but the small signs speak volumes. The joint appearances where gazes do not quite meet, the moments where interaction seems more like a duty than a natural occurrence. And sometimes, it is the excessive perfection itself that makes people question. But Camilla is not the only woman in this game. In another corner of the royal family, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie represent a pure bloodline, a position defined since birth. They are people born into the system, raised with a deep understanding of hierarchy, of ritual, and of boundaries that cannot be crossed. And because of that, the emergence of Catherine, an outsider who stepped in and quickly took center stage, was not always easily accepted. The coldness between them is not about direct confrontations. It is much more subtle. It lies in the way they stand next to each other, in the perfectly maintained distance, in the brief conversations that never go beyond necessary limits. The figure of 1.5 kilometers sounds hard to believe, but it is how some observers describe the symbolic distance between Catherine and the blood princesses at major events. It is not an actual physical distance, but a distance in hierarchy, in position, and in power. In royal rituals, standing positions are never accidental. They are calculated precisely to every step. And Catherine, in her role as the Princess of Wales, is always in front. What does that mean? It means that no matter who they are, no matter what bloodline they carry, they still have to stand behind her. For some, that is just ritual. But for those who understand the value of every symbol in the royal family, it is a clear reminder of each person's true place in the system. And it is in such details that real tension exists. Catherine does not need to say anything. Just walking in her correct position is a statement, but at the same time, every step can be a source of pressure for those behind her. In an environment where everything is encoded by ritual, competition never takes place openly. It happens in silence, in a gaze, in the very small pauses that only the observant would notice. And amidst all of that, Catherine is gradually shaping a new role, not just a princess, but a shadow queen, a queen in the shadows, one who has not officially taken power, but has begun to demonstrate her influence. She does not confront Camila directly. She does not openly display superiority over the princesses, but by appearing at the right time, in the right way, and with a tightly controlled image, she is step by step asserting her position. The question is whether others will accept that. Because in the royal family, power does not only come from titles, it comes from recognition. And that recognition is not always easy to achieve, especially when it involves changes in an order that has existed for a long time. Smiles can hide a lot, but they cannot completely erase the tensions underneath. Catherine may be moving forward, but behind her is a complex web of relationships, expectations, and unspoken competitions. And in that web, every wrong move could come at a price. But perhaps the greatest challenge has yet to appear, because in a world where power is measured by standing position, Catherine had to face another queen from California. Someone who almost brought everything crashing down. If the silent power struggle between the women in the royal family was complex enough, the appearance of Meghan Markle was like a real storm, blowing away all the unspoken rules that Catherine had spent years learning to adapt to. And at the center of that storm was a seemingly simple question that has never had a unified answer. Who made whom cry? The story began with a small detail. The bridesmaid dress for Meghan's wedding, a wardrobe incident, a tense exchange, and then tears. But the problem was not the dress. It was in the way the story was retold. Initially, sources claimed Catherine had made Meghan cry, an image completely opposite to the gentle persona the public was familiar with. But later, in a shocking interview, Meghan gave the opposite version, that it was Catherine who was moved to tears. Two stories, two truths, and in between is a gap that the public cannot fill on their own. The difference between Catherine and Meghan does not lie in that single detail. It lies in who they are as individuals. Catherine, a typically British woman, reserved, emotionally controlled, and trained never to reveal too much in public. Meghan, an American star, accustomed to expressing herself, speaking her mind, and unafraid to challenge rules she sees as outdated. When these two worlds collide, misunderstanding is almost inevitable. But is it only misunderstanding? Some sources suggest that Catherine kept her distance from Meghan from the very beginning, not out of malice, but out of caution. In an environment where every newcomer is closely observed, Catherine may have chosen not to open up too quickly. But for Meghan, who entered the royal family expecting support and connection, that distance may have felt like isolation. Lunches that never happened, invitations that were never sent, brief conversations instead of meaningful relationships. All of these, though small, can accumulate into a sense of exclusion. And when personal emotions begin to take hold, everything becomes more complicated. Catherine, with her experience, understands that silence is sometimes the best way to protect herself and the image of the monarchy. Meghan, by contrast, believes that speaking out is necessary to defend her truth. Two completely different approaches, and neither is entirely wrong. But when they collide, conflict is unavoidable. The media quickly turned the story into a confrontation. On one side, the perfect princess, representing tradition and stability. On the other, the rebellious woman, representing change and the breaking of norms. And the public, as always, was drawn in. The figure of 2.4 billion views on content related to the drama between Catherine and Meghan is not just a statistic. It is proof of the world's obsession with this story. Every small detail is analyzed, every gesture decoded, every word dissected. But amid all that noise, the truth becomes more blurred than ever. Did Catherine intentionally keep her distance to protect her position? Or was she simply doing what she had been taught to do? Did Meghan exaggerate the story to gain sympathy? Or was she simply sharing her personal experience within a system where she felt she did not belong? No one can answer with certainty. What is clear is that from that moment on, their relationship was never truly repaired. Joint appearances became rare. Interactions, when they occurred, felt more formal than natural, and each seemed to choose a separate path. Catherine continued to strengthen her image as a stable pillar of the monarchy. Meghan, together with Harry, left the system and began building a new life, one where they could control their own narrative. Two paths, two strategies, two completely different approaches to power. But whatever paths they chose, they remained bound by the same reality, that every action would be watched, analyzed, and judged. The question of who made whom cry may never have a final answer. But perhaps that question is no longer the most important. What matters is what it represents. A system where personal conflicts are never just personal, where every disagreement can become a global story, and where the truth, whatever it may be, is always covered by layers of interpretation. Catherine may have succeeded in preserving her image. Meghan may have succeeded in telling her story. But both have paid a price. And while the noise surrounding Meghan had not yet faded, Catherine was forced to confront the greatest enemy of her life, the betrayal of her own health. It began with a disappearance. No clear announcement. No public appearances. No official schedule, an unusual absence in the tightly managed presence that had always defined Catherine. At first, the public accepted the explanation of surgery and recovery. But as weeks passed, without further information, curiosity quickly turned into suspicion. Then, suspicion turned into speculation. And speculation turned into conspiracy theories. Within 1 week, more than 100 million searches asking where Kate Middleton is flooded search engines, a number that is not only staggering, but also reflects the level of public obsession with her disappearance. Everyone had a theory. Some believed she was suffering serious complications after surgery. Others went further, spreading baseless rumors that she had died and that everything was being concealed. The most extreme theories began to emerge. Old images of Catherine were analyzed pixel by pixel, suspected of being altered. Videos were replayed frame by frame, as if a hidden secret might be revealed if examined closely enough. Some even believed that the person appearing in the rare images was not her, but a replacement. It sounds absurd, but in an information crisis, the line between reality and imagination becomes more blurred than ever. What is striking is that not only anonymous individuals took part in this wave, some well-known figures, people with significant influence, also helped fuel the fire. Jokes that seemed harmless, comments filled with sarcasm, speculations shared with millions of followers without any verified evidence. In that moment, Catherine was no longer a person. She became a topic, a story, an object of discussion. And that loss of humanity is perhaps the most frightening part. Because when a person is turned into a symbol, the limits of respect seem to disappear. During those days, the royal family remained silent, a silence that could be seen as strategic, but also interpreted as concealment. And in that gap of information, the imagination of the public was free to grow, uncontrolled and without limits. Until the truth was revealed, Catherine appeared in a video, looking directly into the camera, her voice calm but unable to hide her exhaustion. She confirmed that she was undergoing cancer treatment. No more speculation, no more theories, only the truth. In that moment, everything seemed to stop. Those who once mocked fell silent. Those who once doubted turned to sympathy. But that shift came too late to erase what had already happened. Because the words had been spoken, the comments had been posted, and the wounds, though invisible, still remained. The question is, why did everything go so far? Is it because the public feels entitled to know everything about public figures, or because in the age of social media, sharing and speculating have become so easy that people forget there is a real human being behind every story? For Catherine, this was not just a media crisis. It was a deeply personal experience, a period in which she had to face not only illness, but also the pressure of a world watching her every move. Yet within that moment, another transformation began to take shape. No longer subtle signals like nail color or hairstyle. This time, the change came from within, from the way she faced the challenge, from the way she chose to appear before the public, not as a perfect symbol, but as a person in the middle of a fight. Catherine did not respond with anger. She did not condemn those who mocked her. Instead, she chose to tell her story directly, honestly, and with control. That is not weakness. That is a different kind of strength. A strength that does not need to prove itself through power or position, but through the ability to stand firm when everything around is collapsing. And perhaps it was that very moment that changed how the public sees her. No longer just a princess with a carefully constructed image, no longer just a figure in royal drama. Catherine became something else, a symbol of resilience in an era where everything can be distorted. But that journey is not over, because ahead of her lies not only treatment, but the task of redefining herself in an entirely new context. And if what we have seen are signs, then perhaps Catherine Middleton is not merely overcoming a difficult period, she is preparing for a return no longer limited by old expectations. In the shadow of illness, Kate did not choose to fall. She chose to rebuild herself into a more powerful version than ever before. Ladies and gentlemen, after everything that has happened, from the cracks in a perfect image, the silent confrontations within palace walls, to the most intense media storm she has ever faced, the year 2026 opens as an entirely new chapter, no longer a story of endurance or defense. This is the moment of resurgence. Catherine's return is not loud, but clear enough to command the attention of the world. Her first appearances after treatment do not carry the presence of someone recovering from crisis, but of someone who has redefined herself. Her gaze is sharper, calmer, and most importantly, more intentional, no longer the image of a royal consort standing in the background. Catherine begins to appear as a true center of royal events. This is especially evident in her role alongside King Charles. As the king's health becomes a subject of concern, Catherine gradually takes on more responsibility, not only in ceremonial duties, but also in maintaining the stable image of the monarchy before the public. Diplomatic receptions, state visits, and especially state banquets, where every detail is carefully considered, begin to carry her clear imprint. 3 state banquets in 1 year, a number never seen before for a royal consort, is not just proof of her workload. It is a statement that Catherine is no longer simply a supporter. She is becoming a pillar. At these events, the way she moves, the way she communicates, the way she orchestrates space and people around her all reveal remarkable control. Seasoned observers have begun using a new phrase when referring to her, a true queen, not because of an official title, but because of the way she embodies her role. But Catherine's power does not lie only in grand events. An important part of her rise lies in how she prepares for the future, and at the center of that future is Prince George. If in the past, George appeared as a royal child with charming moments before the camera, now each of his appearances is far more carefully considered. Catherine plays a key role in shaping George's image and preparation, not only in education or etiquette, but in how he understands his place in the world. Sources close to the family suggest that Catherine places special emphasis on giving George a balanced childhood, while gradually introducing him to the responsibilities that await. This is not a simple task. History has shown that the pressure of being born to become king can leave deep consequences, and perhaps because she understands this so clearly, Catherine chooses a different approach, more careful, more strategic. She is not just raising a child, she is preparing a king. At the same time, her relationship with William appears to have entered a new phase, no longer marked by the tensions once rumored. They now appear as a united pair. With a clearer division of roles, William focuses on long-term and strategic responsibilities, while Catherine takes on the role of connecting with the public and maintaining a stable image. This coordination is not accidental. It is the result of years of adaptation and adjustment under pressure. And within that coordination, Catherine is no longer following behind. She is a true partner. What is striking is that even with greater responsibility, Catherine has maintained balance in her image. She has not become distant or overly rigid. On the contrary, her warmth and ability to connect with the public remain among her greatest strengths. But now, that warmth is paired with a stronger sense of authority. It is a subtle yet profound transformation. From a commoner entering the royal family with hesitation, Catherine has traveled a long and challenging path. Each stage, each event has left its mark, shaping who she is today. And the year 2026 seems to be the point where all those experiences converge. The question is no longer whether she can adapt. The question is how she will shape the future of the monarchy. Because when someone has faced enough trials, enough pressure, and enough upheaval, they do not simply survive. They begin to reshape the world around them. And Catherine Middleton appears to be at that very stage. A stage where every step is no longer a reaction, but a strategy. A stage where image is no longer just a symbol, but a tool. And a stage where she is no longer merely part of the system. She is becoming one of those who shape it. The journey from a trembling commoner to a woman holding the fate of a dynasty is nearing a complete and powerful conclusion. From the first cracks in a perfect image to the most intense media storm, from silent battles within palace walls to a global confrontation with Meghan, Catherine Middleton has endured a journey that few could withstand. What sets her apart is not only her endurance, but her ability to turn pressure into power, quietly, without declarations. Yet every step she takes carries calculation and clear purpose. At a time when the British monarchy faces constant upheaval, from the king's health to internal fractures that have never fully healed, Catherine emerges as a rare anchor, not through title, but through control of image, connection with the public, and the strength to stand firm against every storm. She is not only protecting her position, she is protecting the very symbol the monarchy represents. The crown may be heavy, but Kate Middleton has proven she was born to carry it. Do not forget to like and subscribe to discover the next secrets about Prince Harry in next week's video. Ladies and gentlemen, inside a sealed office within Buckingham Palace, a legal document was signed. There was no prior announcement. There was no press. There was none of the usual royal ceremony. Yet, according to multiple internal sources, that moment marked an unprecedented turning point in the modern history of the British royal family. A decree, reportedly approved by Prince William, directly targeted Prince Harry. The consequences were immediate and irreversible. Titles were placed under review for removal. Control over assets was tightened. And most striking of all, a 15-year-old teenager who had almost never appeared in public was suddenly mentioned as a potential replacement within the Sussex line of succession. If one looks only at the outcome, many might assume this was a spontaneous reaction to long-standing tensions. But the documents we have obtained tell a completely different story. Everything appears to have been prepared over the previous 18 months, step by step, quietly, systematically. Legal advisors, powerful figures behind palace doors. Even unofficial diplomatic channels were reportedly involved in the process. Alongside this were 8 serious incidents linked to Harry during his time in Australia, details that have never been widely disclosed, yet served as the legal foundation for the final decision. At this point, the question is no longer simply about family. Is William acting as a guardian of the monarchy, willing to sacrifice personal bonds to preserve order? Or is this a calculated act of retaliation, coldly directed at the brother who once shook the institution? Before we go deeper into these classified files, the choice is yours. If you believe this is about protecting the crown, comment 1. If you believe this is a ruthless act of revenge, comment 2. Because what is about to be revealed may force you to reconsider the entire story from the beginning. The sequence began on March 17, 2026, when Prince Harry arrived in Sydney on what was described as a personal trip, unrelated to any official royal duty. Yet, it was precisely that unofficial nature that became the starting point for a series of violations later compiled into a report that shocked insiders. What unfolded in less than a week in Australia was not merely impulsive behavior. According to investigative sources we have accessed, it was a structured pattern of actions significant enough to raise concerns among senior advisors in London about the level of risk Harry was creating for the entire royal power structure. The first violation, and one that alarmed many legal experts, involved a sum of $250,000. According to financial traces, the money was routed through a shell company registered in Delaware before appearing in an investment fund linked to a group of partners in Sydney. The issue was not the amount, but the method. Delaware has long been known as a jurisdiction that allows anonymous financial structures to operate with very low transparency. For a member of the royal family to use such a channel, whether directly or indirectly, immediately raised suspicions of money laundering or, at the very least, the avoidance of international financial controls. Some internal sources suggest Harry may not have personally managed the transaction, but the appearance of his name within the chain was enough to create what was described as a critical vulnerability in his record. The second violation involved diplomatic misrepresentation. At a private event held at a luxury seaside resort in Sydney, Harry reportedly introduced himself to a group of international business figures as an unofficial representative of the British royal family. On the surface, this might appear to be simple exaggeration, but in diplomacy, every word carries legal weight. Assigning oneself a representative role without formal authorization can be viewed as a serious breach of diplomatic protocol, with potential political consequences if partners misinterpret the message. The third violation, and one of the most controversial details, involved the unauthorized wearing of military uniform. At a private gathering, Harry appeared in a uniform bearing insignia he was no longer entitled to use after stepping back from official royal duties. To the public, this might seem symbolic, but to the military and the monarchy, it represents a serious breach of honor and regulation. A uniform is not merely clothing, it is a symbol of duty and authority. Using it improperly is regarded as an offense against the entire system. The fourth violation concerned a 7-hour period during which Harry effectively disappeared from the royal security network in Sydney. According to reports, from around 9 in the evening until 4 the following morning. There was no recorded data confirming his exact location. For an individual once under high-level protection, such a lapse is considered unacceptable. It raises not only concerns about personal safety, but also suspicions about activities conducted during that time. Some sources suggest this may have been when off-the-record meetings took place, where sensitive discussions could have occurred. The fifth violation centered on a private gathering attended by 47 witnesses. According to multiple accounts, Harry made direct critical remarks about King Charles, not only on a personal level but also regarding the management of the monarchy. If confirmed, such statements would go beyond personal disrespect and could be interpreted as undermining the credibility of the institution. In a system where image and unity are essential, remarks like these are considered extremely dangerous. The sixth violation involved the use of unofficial communication networks to exchange sensitive information. Security experts believe that during his time in Sydney, Harry used communication channels that were not encrypted to royal standards, creating the possibility that information could be leaked or exploited by third parties. This was not a minor error, but a security vulnerability that could be leveraged in a complex geopolitical environment. The seventh violation concerned contact with individuals listed under British Intelligence Watch. While there is no evidence of illegal transactions, the fact that a member of the royal family met with sensitive figures without going through proper clearance procedures cannot be ignored. It reflects a lack of oversight and has the potential to place the entire system at risk. The final violation, and perhaps the culmination of all the others, was defiance. According to internal reports, Harry repeatedly ignored recommendations from his security team and advisors. Continuing to engage in activities he had been warned were inappropriate. This was no longer a personal matter, but a sign of a deep fracture between him and the system he once belonged to. When reviewing all 8 categories of violations, what stands out is not only each individual act, but how they connect to form a broader picture. A pattern of uncontrolled actions, unfolding within a short period of time, yet significant enough to trigger a chain reaction from London. And while Harry may have believed he was living in a space of freedom, detached from former constraints, the reality was entirely different. What Harry did not know was that every step he took in Sydney was under the lens of British intelligence. And while he was immersed in what appeared to be a moment of personal freedom, in London, a harsh plan had already been set in motion. If what happened in Sydney shocked the public with its speed and severity, then what took place earlier in London sent a chill through observers because of its cold precision. Because when tracing the timeline backward, every detail points to a clear starting moment. November 2025. That was not when the crisis erupted. It was when a plan began to take shape. According to internal documents we have accessed, within the first 2 weeks of that month, 3 of the most senior royal lawyers were discreetly approached. There were no formal invitations. There were no public records. Everything was conducted through intermediaries, with near absolute confidentiality. What stands out is not the act of hiring legal counsel, but their level of authority. These were not ordinary advisors. They were individuals who had handled the most sensitive matters related to constitutional structure and royal authority. When these three names appear together in a single file, it almost certainly indicates that the issue under review is no longer a private family matter. A source close to the legal team revealed that the assignment was not to resolve a specific dispute, but to construct a complete legal framework, a framework strong enough to address a situation without precedent, to remove the authority of a royal family member without destabilizing the entire system. It may sound simple, but in reality it is an extraordinarily complex challenge, because every action must remain within the limits of the law, while still protecting the image of the monarchy in the eyes of the public. Over the next 3 months, from the end of 2025 into the beginning of 2026, a series of closed-door meetings took place. There were no official records. There were no external participants. But based on what we have gathered, the discussions focused on analyzing every possible scenario. If Harry continued to violate boundaries, what would the response be? If evidence was collected, how would the process unfold? And most importantly, how could everything be executed without triggering a public crisis? The peak of this preparation phase was a meeting that lasted 180 minutes between Prince William and Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The meeting was not publicly announced and was only indirectly confirmed through political sources. According to what has been revealed, the discussion went beyond a simple exchange of information. It was a strategic step, because, within the British constitutional system, any decision involving royal authority is closely connected to the government. William seeking direct input from the Prime Minister reflects both the seriousness of the issue and the caution behind every move. One political analyst described this as a decisive moment, where the boundary between traditional power and modern governance was recalibrated. William was not acting merely as a son within a family. He was acting as a future leader, one who understands that every decision must be considered within a broader national context. Alongside the legal and political efforts, an information-gathering campaign was also underway. Reports from Australia, from security agencies, and from unofficial sources were collected and analyzed. Every detail, no matter how small, was documented, not for immediate use, but to build a comprehensive file, a file that, once revealed, would leave no room for doubt. What surprised many was the level of patience throughout the entire process. There were no rushed moves. There were no emotional reactions. Everything unfolded slowly but decisively, as if each step had been calculated in advance. An anonymous advisor stated that the goal was not punishment, but control. Control the situation before it moves beyond reach. Yet it is precisely that sense of control that raises a larger question. Was this truly a measure to protect the monarchy? Or a long-prepared plan aimed at removing a figure no longer considered suitable? When observing how the events in Sydney were quickly transformed into a legal foundation, many began to suspect that everything had been anticipated. That Harry trip was not the cause, but merely the catalyst for a decision that had already been prepared. Within the royal family, opposing views began to emerge. Some believed that William was doing what was necessary, placing the interests of the institution above personal emotion, but others expressed concern that this approach was too cold, too calculated, and could set a dangerous precedent. Because if one royal member could be removed in this way, then no one was truly safe. Whichever view prevails, one fact cannot be denied. This entire operation bears the clear mark of long-term preparation. 18 months was not a random span of time. It was long enough to build a plan, long enough to gather evidence, and long enough to ensure that when the moment came, everything would unfold exactly as intended. And as the final pieces began to fall into place, as reports from Sydney were delivered back to London, as closed-door meetings shifted into action, one reality became clearer than ever. This was not a spontaneous reaction. It was the result of a carefully calculated campaign, where every move had a purpose, and every decision had been weighed in advance. The legal framework was ready. The evidence was sufficient. Now, the monarchy needed a new face to fill the void left by Harry, a figure no one had expected. It did not begin with a ceremony. There were no trumpets, no motorcades, no formal rituals to mark a transfer of power. But by the end of March 2026, a quiet shift had taken place within the financial system of the British royal family, and that shift became the clearest signal that the balance had truly changed. The name of Prince Harry began to disappear from a series of financial structures in which he had previously been the primary beneficiary. Not removed immediately, but effectively frozen. Trust funds valued at £12 million, equivalent to more than 380 billion Vietnamese dong, were placed under special control. All transactions were suspended, all access was restricted, and within just a few weeks, legal adjustments began to appear, step by step, redirecting control toward another name, James, Earl of Wessex, a name that had previously been almost absent from any succession scenario related to Sussex, a 15-year-old teenager, living quietly, rarely speaking, with almost no personal profile in the public eye. Yet it was precisely that lack of visibility, according to many observers, that became the decisive factor in this decision. Financial documents show that the transfer process was far from simple. These trust funds were structured with multiple layers of legal protection, designed to prevent easy manipulation. Changing the beneficiary required agreement from multiple parties, from lawyers and financial advisors to those holding the highest decision-making authority. This means the decision was not only considered, but prepared long before the public became aware. Alongside the £12 million assets, an annual allowance of £875,000 was also restructured. Previously, this sum was tied to Harry's role and position within the system. But as that position was no longer maintained, the flow of funds shifted accordingly. New terms were established, directing the structure toward one in which James began to occupy a more central role. Numbers do not lie. They reflect a reality in which power is shifting, not through public statements, but through concrete financial decisions. In the world of the monarchy, money is not merely wealth. It is a tool of control. It determines who truly holds position, and who is gradually being removed from the system. But what makes this story particularly stark is not the money. It is the contrast between two individuals. Harry, a figure constantly in the media, constantly generating controversy, constantly placing himself at the center of every narrative. A man unafraid to speak his mind, unafraid to confront, and unafraid to break rules that have existed for hundreds of years. James, a teenager who is almost invisible. No scandals, no shocking statements, no actions that could be interpreted negatively. An image so clean it is almost flawless. In a system seeking to protect itself, the choice between these two profiles becomes easier to understand. One represents risk. The other represents absolute safety. And at a time when every mistake can be amplified on a global scale, safety becomes the highest priority. Yet that very choice of safety raises another question. What is the cost of stability? James is only 15 years old, an age when he should still be living in a world separate from the pressures of power. Yet in a short period of time, he has been drawn into a restructuring he did not create. There is no sign that James actively stepped into this role. There is no evidence that he desired it. Everything unfolded as if it had been arranged in advance. A source close to the situation revealed that James was almost never fully informed about the scale of the changes unfolding around him. He was shielded from the media, shielded from public pressure, yet at the same time placed into a position from which there was no easy way out. It was not a choice. It was a responsibility imposed upon him. From another perspective, this is how the royal family operates in times of crisis. When one link is deemed no longer suitable, the system adjusts itself to find a replacement. There is no room for emotion. There is no room for hesitation. Only calculation. And it is precisely that calculation that has led many to reconsider the entire story. Was this truly a reaction to recent violations? Or had everything already been shaped in advance, waiting only for the right moment to be executed? Meanwhile, on the other side of the picture, there remains a silence filled with uncertainty. Harry has not spoken. He has not responded. He has not appeared. An unusual silence for someone who once used the media as a powerful tool. Yet that silence has not calmed the situation. On the contrary, it has made everything more unpredictable. Some analysts believe Harry is preparing for a major response, a final move that could change the entire balance, a media-nuclear moment, where every secret, every hidden detail, every untold story would be brought into the light. If that were to happen, it would not affect just one individual. The entire system could be shaken. But there is another possibility, that every path has already been controlled, that financial resources, communication channels, and even Harry's ability to act have been narrowed to the point where few options remain. If that is true, then the silence is not a strategy. It is the result of a process of control that has already been completed. What is unfolding is no longer a family story. It is a restructuring of power, where every decision carries long-term consequences. On one side stands a teenager pushed into the center. On the other stands a man who once belonged to the system but is now being pushed out. And in the middle of it all is a void that no one can yet fully define. A title is transferred. A vast fortune changes hands. But behind the numbers is a family that is breaking apart completely. Will Harry remain silent? Or will he trigger a final media explosion? Ladies and gentlemen, what has taken place over the past months does not stop at a legal decision or a financial restructuring. It has opened a chain of consequences that even those involved can no longer fully control. When all the data is placed on the table, strategists and royal advisors have begun to construct possible scenarios, not to speculate emotionally, but to prepare for every outcome. 5 scenarios have been discussed most frequently, each reflecting a different direction for this crisis. The first scenario is surrender. In this scenario, Harry accepts all the changes that have been imposed. No resistance, no public criticism, no use of the media as a tool. In return, he may receive a certain level of protection from the royal family, along with financial arrangements that allow him to maintain a stable life. This is the least disruptive option for the system, but also the least likely. Given Harry's personality and history of action, a man who has repeatedly confronted publicly is unlikely to suddenly choose complete silence, unless all other options have been closed. The second scenario is litigation. This is the legal path, where Harry may attempt to challenge the decisions that have been made. He could question the legality of the asset freeze, the procedures used to change beneficiaries in the trust funds, and even the authority of those who signed the relevant decrees. But this is a double-edged sword. Such a case would be prolonged, costly, and more importantly, would expose internal information to public scrutiny. This could damage not only the royal family, but also Harry himself. For that reason, even with legal grounds, it remains a high-risk option. The third scenario is compromise, a middle ground, where both sides make concessions to avoid a full-scale confrontation. In this scenario, Harry may agree to relinquish part of his interests in exchange for certain guarantees regarding finances or reputation. The royal family, on the other hand, may ease some control measures to reduce public pressure. This is a pragmatic scenario, and in past crises it has been applied. However, in the current context, where tensions have escalated to an extreme level, the likelihood of reaching such an agreement is more fragile than ever. The fourth scenario, and also the one assessed as having the highest probability at 41%, is permanent separation. No remaining substantive connection between Harry and the power structure of the royal family. No role, no influence, no financial dependence. A complete severance, both legally and symbolically. In this scenario, Harry would have to rebuild his life outside the system he once belonged to. That means losing resources that were once taken for granted. No more protection from the security apparatus. No more access to traditional networks of influence. No more place in official events. What remains is personal reputation, and the ability to use it to survive in a completely different environment. On the other side, the royal family would also face significant consequences. Removing a member is not unprecedented, but doing so in the context of modern media presents an entirely different challenge. Every decision is scrutinized. Every move can be interpreted in multiple ways. And in a world where images can spread within seconds, controlling the narrative becomes more difficult than ever. What makes this scenario particularly notable is not only its probability, but the logic behind it. When the level of conflict passes a certain threshold, when trust has eroded, and when communication channels are no longer effective, separation becomes almost inevitable, not because it is the best option, but because it is the most feasible one under the current circumstances. The fifth scenario is reconciliation, an ending that many hope for, yet one with little basis for confidence. For this to happen, both sides would need to be willing to change their positions, to acknowledge past mistakes, and to place shared interests above personal ego. In theory, this is always possible, but in reality, when wounds have accumulated over many years, healing requires not only time, but also a level of goodwill that currently shows no clear signs of existing. When these 5 scenarios are placed side by side, a broader picture begins to emerge. There is no perfect option. Each path carries its own consequences. What stands out, however, is the way the system has prepared for each possibility. From building a legal framework, to controlling financial structures, to reshaping public image, everything reflects a high level of readiness. And it is precisely that readiness that leads to an unavoidable conclusion. No matter which scenario unfolds, the balance of power has shifted in one direction. The royal family, with its full machinery and resources, has established a position from which it can control most of what comes next. Harry, regardless of the path he chooses, will be facing a system that has been carefully prepared. But power is never without cost. Every decision leaves a trace. Every victory carries a price. And in this case, that price is measured not only in money or position, but in the fractures within a family once seen as a symbol of unity. Looking back at the entire chain of events, from the mysterious hours of disappearance in Sydney to the cold legal decisions in London, it becomes clear that this is no longer a simple family crisis. It is a historic turning point, one that many experts compare to the abdication crisis of 1936. At that time, a king gave up his throne for love. Today, a future heir chooses to protect the throne by cutting away his own blood. William has demonstrated something that many once questioned. He is not merely a symbolic figure of inheritance, but someone prepared to act when necessary, without hesitation, without emotion, and above all, without allowing any personal factor to undermine the interests of the monarchy. In the eyes of his supporters, this is the mark of a strong leader, a future king who understands that, to protect a system that has endured for centuries, one must sometimes make decisions that others cannot accept. But strength always brings consequences. A title has been transferred. A vast fortune has changed hands. And most importantly, a family has been divided in a way that may be impossible to repair. What was once a symbol of unity has now become evidence of the deepest fracture in the modern history of the British royal family. Harry may continue to hold on to his spotlight in the United States. He may tell his story in his own way, to those willing to listen. But in Britain, the reality has changed. The name Duke of Sussex is no longer tied to him. It now belongs to another. Within a newly shaped structure of power, history never favors those who hesitate. It is written by those who act, by those who prevail. And at this moment, the one holding the pen is none other than William. If you want to continue uncovering secrets never revealed behind royal doors, do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. The sound of the bells from the Big Ben clock tower echoed slowly, each heavy chime like a signal of something irreversible. In the chilling silence of Buckingham Palace, an undisclosed upheaval was quietly spreading behind closed doors. A contract was torn apart just before the decisive moment. A final plea was rejected without hesitation on a sick bed. And at the center of it all was a move that shook the entire structure of royal power. King Charles III is said to have made a decision that many are calling the most ruthless of his reign. He stripped away the real power of the woman who had stood beside him for decades, Queen Camila, and handed the full key of influence to his daughter-in-law, Catherine, Princess of Wales. According to carefully leaked internal sources, Camilla was almost completely sidelined from core decisions. Strategic meetings took place without her name on the attendance list. Sensitive documents were redirected straight to Catherine, a shift of power that required no official announcement, yet was clear enough for insiders to understand that the old order had been replaced. There were no gunshots, no public confrontation. But it was precisely this silence that made the atmosphere colder than ever. This was no longer about personal conflict, but a calculated restructuring of power with consequences that could last for generations. The question now is no longer simply about right or wrong. Is this a bitter betrayal of a wife who quietly stood behind the scenes for so many years? Or a decisive move to protect the future of the throne against inevitable instability? If you support the king's decisiveness, comment number 1. If you feel sympathy for Camilla, comment number 2. And to understand why King Charles made this controversial decision, every secret will gradually be revealed right after this. After the silent yet chilling shock that unfolded within Buckingham Palace, the name most frequently mentioned was not the winner, but the one who seemed to have been pushed to the edge of the power game. Queen Camilla, a woman who spent decades navigating storms to reach her current position, now faces a bitter paradox. She has the title, she has the rank, but the biggest question remains: does she truly have power? To understand this, one must return to the year 2005. When the marriage between King Charles III and Camilla was officially announced, at that time, public opposition in Britain was at its lowest point. Some unofficial surveys showed support levels nearly at 0%, a shocking number that accurately reflected public sentiment at the time. Camilla was not seen as a woman entering the royal family for love, but was instead associated with the image of an intruder in the symbolic marriage between Charles and Princess Diana. For that reason, an unspoken agreement was established to ease public outrage. Camilla would never be called queen. She would carry a more modest title, a way to minimize negative reactions and protect the image of the monarchy. This was not just a compromise in title, but the first sign that her position within the power structure had never truly been solid. Years passed, and Camilla's image gradually improved through a careful media strategy. She appeared more frequently in public engagements, participated in charitable organizations, and slowly rebuilt goodwill. But behind the smiling photographs and courteous handshakes, one question always lingered internally. Was Camila truly in control, or simply positioned to appear in the right role? Internal sources reveal a picture completely different from what the public sees. While ceremonies and official events continued as usual, major strategic decisions did not pass through her office. Succession plans, documents related to the future of the monarchy, even structural changes in power, were handled in meetings that Camila was never invited to attend. This was not a coincidence. It reflected a reality that despite holding the highest title beside the king, she was not part of the core circle of power. Some royal experts believe that from the beginning, Camila was shaped as a symbolic figure rather than a center of authority. Her role was to stabilize the king's personal image and soften past controversies, not to directly shape the future of the monarchy. This explains why even when King Charles III ascended the throne, there was no clear transfer of power accompanying Camilla's rise to queen. Her silence at critical moments has only deepened the questions. Is it acceptance or powerlessness? In an environment where every glance and gesture carries political meaning, the absence of a queen from strategic discussions cannot be explained simply by personal factors. It reveals a boundary that was drawn long ago, and one that has never been erased. There are even reports suggesting that certain plans to reform the monarchy in the future had been prepared long in advance without Camilla's involvement. These documents were kept strictly confidential, circulated only among a small circle of close advisors and key members of the royal family. This further reinforces the view that real power does not lie in titles, but in access to information and participation in decision-making. From the outside, Camila may still appear to stand at the highest position beside the king, but its deeper look into the internal workings reveals something else. She resembles a piece that has already fulfilled its historical role, a piece once crucial in stabilizing the image of King Charles III, but now gradually being removed from the board as a new game is set in motion. This story is not just about one individual. It reflects how the British monarchy operates during sensitive transitions of power. What the public sees is only the surface. Behind it lies calculated strategy down to the smallest detail, where personal emotions can be set aside in favor of long-term planning. And while Camila continues trying to reinforce a position that is already fragile, on the other side of the palace, a new force has been quietly rising with unstoppable strength. A completely contrasting figure is taking shape. Catherine, Princess of Wales, creates no noise. She does not react publicly. She does not compete for position in ways that are easily visible. Yet it is precisely this calculated silence that becomes the most powerful weapon she possesses. If Camila was drawn into narratives colored by personal emotion, Catherine chose an entirely different path. She does not play the game of drama. She plays a much larger game. It is macro-level politics within the monarchy, where every move is measured by long-term impact rather than immediate gain. And at the center of that strategy is the Early Years Initiative, a project presented on the surface as a charitable effort, but in reality carrying a scale and depth far beyond conventional definition. According to internal reports, this campaign does not stop at raising public awareness about early childhood development. It has mobilized more than 50,000 scientific data sets, connecting with leading experts in psychology, education, and public health. More importantly, it has attracted the participation of high-level policymakers, individuals who have the ability to directly influence national policy. This means that Catherine is not only building the image of a royal family member devoted to society, but is also gradually positioning herself as someone with real influence over policy direction. What stands out is the way she has implemented this entire strategy. There is no need for strong declarations. No direct confrontation with anyone. Catherine approaches the top advisors of King Charles III through professional and academic channels. Informal meetings. Closed-door seminars. In-depth discussions. All of these create a network of connections where she does not need to go through Camila to gain the attention of the center of power. This is the decisive difference. While Camila is limited by a symbolic role, Catherine builds for herself an independent foundation of influence. She does not rely on a title to have power. She creates power from the value she brings. And when that value becomes significant enough, the system naturally adjusts to accommodate her presence. Some sources suggest that in many recent strategic discussions, Catherine's name appears more frequently in internal documents, not as an honorary participant, but as a figure with a real role in shaping the long-term programs of the monarchy. This indicates that a shift in power is taking place. Not loudly, but clearly. Beyond that, Catherine demonstrates an ability that very few members of the royal family achieve. It is the ability to connect tradition with modernity. She understands the core values that the monarchy must preserve, while also recognizing that to survive in the 21st century, the system must change, and that change cannot come from symbolic statements, but must come from concrete actions that can be measured and evaluated. For that reason, early years is not just a social project. It is a strategic platform, a tool that allows Catherine to prove that she is not merely a symbol, but someone capable of creating real impact. And when numbers, data, and tangible results are presented, they create something that no emotional debate can deny. That is legitimacy based on capability. In that context, King Charles III, gradually shifting his attention toward Catherine, is no longer difficult to understand. He does not only see in her an heir to image, but also a strategic partner who can help him carry out necessary reforms during his reign. And when that trust is established, power naturally follows. However, what makes this story even more compelling is the way Catherine maintains balance. She never appears as someone competing for power. There are no controversial statements, no actions that directly challenge anyone. Everything is carried out under a perfect layer of composure and professionalism. Yet it is precisely this composure that makes her moves more unpredictable and harder to stop. From another perspective, it can be said that Catherine is playing a long-term game, a game in which every move is calculated to create advantage in the future. And when looking back at the entire process, people begin to realize that her rise is not a surprise. It is the result of a strategy built early, implemented consistently, and adjusted flexibly at each stage. Meanwhile, the distance between her and Camila becomes increasingly clear, not because of any direct confrontation, but because of two completely different approaches to power. One relies on an existing position, the other creates a position for itself. And in a system that always prioritizes effectiveness and sustainability, the outcome has almost been decided in advance. What is happening behind the doors of Buckingham Palace is not a noisy battle. It is a process of power restructuring taking place in silence, where those who understand the rules of the game gradually gain the advantage. And Catherine, with all her patience and calculation, is proving that she not only understands the rules, but also knows how to change them in her favor. All the pieces seem to have been arranged for a historic transition, but perhaps even Catherine did not expect that a devastating medical event would become the trigger, pushing her to the peak of power sooner than any scenario had anticipated. The year 2024 opened like a deep crack in what once seemed to be the solid wall of the British monarchy. What happened was not just a personal event, but quickly turned into a media earthquake, sweeping through every layer of public opinion. When Catherine, Princess of Wales, appeared in a video announcing her cancer condition, the world seemed to pause for a few brief minutes. Within 24 hours, more than 100 million searches related to her name surged globally, a staggering number. And more notably, the level of attention was recorded to be 10 times higher than any event related to Queen Camilla over many previous years. This was not mere curiosity. It was a collective emotional response. The public did not just watch. They empathized. They worried. They followed every smallest development. And in that moment, one thing became clearer than ever. The connection between Catherine and the public was not built on titles or protocol, but on sincerity and the ability to touch human emotion. What is striking is that this moment coincided in a remarkable way with a period when Buckingham Palace was facing an unprecedented wave of pressure. Questions about transparency, about the role of royal family members, about the relevance of a long-standing institution in the modern age, all emerged at once. The royal image, carefully constructed over generations, began to show visible cracks. In that context, Catherine's video was not just a personal message. It unintentionally became a psychological anchor for the public, a human, genuine, and relatable image at a time filled with doubt. And it was precisely this that created a powerful contrast. While the system seemed to be wavering, one individual stood firm and even restored the fading trust. Many media analysts believe that this was one of the rare moments when a member of the royal family could reverse the flow of public opinion with a single personal message. No complex media campaign, no political statements, just sincerity at the right moment. And Catherine achieved exactly that. From an internal perspective, this event also created an effect that cannot be underestimated. King Charles III, who is facing his own pressures regarding health and responsibility, is said to have closely monitored public reaction. Numbers do not lie. The level of attention, the support, and most importantly, the trust, are all converging toward one side. This raises a strategic question that any leader must face. When the system is gradually losing its connection with the public, who is capable of restoring that bridge? And at this moment, the answer seems to be only one. Catherine is not just a member of the royal family. She has become a symbol of resilience, of empathy, and of a monarchy that feels closer to real life. The parallel between the decline of public trust in the monarchy and the way Catherine has unintentionally become a new anchor cannot be ignored. It recalls moments in history when a single individual could shift the entire landscape simply through presence. And for King Charles III, this is not merely an emotional observation. It is strategic data. Meanwhile, the gap between Catherine and Camilla has become more evident than ever, not because of any specific action, but because of the difference in public response. One side receives deep sympathy. The other struggles to generate a similar emotional wave, despite holding an official position. And in an era where image and emotion are decisive, this difference carries significant weight. Some sources suggest that after this event, internal discussions within the royal family have become more intense, not because of personal conflict, but because strategic choices are becoming urgent. When public trust becomes a matter of survival, placing the right person in the right position is no longer an option, but a necessity. Catherine, with everything she has demonstrated, appears to possess all the qualities the monarchy needs at this stage: stability in image, the ability to connect with the public, and a strategic foundation already built through initiatives such as early years. All of this forms a profile that is difficult to overlook. However, what makes the story more dramatic is the personal factor, because any decision involving a restructuring of power cannot be separated from family relationships. And here, the relationship between King Charles III and Queen Camilla is not something that can easily be set aside. For that reason, the events of the year 2024 are not only a test for Catherine, they are also a test for the entire power structure of the monarchy. Who will lead in the next phase? Who will become the face of public trust? And more importantly, who will be the person the king chooses to entrust with the future of an entire dynasty. When all of these factors converge, a decision becomes inevitable. There is no more room for delay, no more space for compromise, and in that moment, all eyes turn to the one at the top, because only he can make the final choice. When the trust of the people rests on a single figure, King Charles III understands that he must make a harsh decision, either his wife or the future of the House of Windsor. After everything that has unfolded in the year 2024, the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace is no longer the same. The familiar rhythm of orderly ceremony has been replaced by a quiet tension, as if everything is moving toward an unavoidable breaking point. And just as many internal sources had suggested, a direct confrontation between Queen Camilla and King Charles III finally took place. Not loudly, not publicly, but cold enough to leave a lasting impression on those who witnessed it. According to leaked information, Camilla's demand was far from simple. She wanted an official document, a form of commitment with legal or at least internal authority, to guarantee her power in all future scenarios. Not just a title, not just a symbolic role, but the right to directly participate in strategic decisions of the monarchy, regardless of the king's health or any changes in the line of succession. In other words, Camilla no longer wanted to stand on the sidelines. She wanted a position that could not be replaced. This was not a sudden request. It was the result of years of accumulated insecurity, from the time she faced intense public opposition when marrying King Charles III, to the gradual improvement of her image. Camilla has always had to confront the reality that her position was never fully secure, and as signs of shifting power became more apparent, especially with the strong rise of Catherine, Princess of Wales, the need for assurance became more urgent than ever. But the king's response, according to many sources, could be summed up in a single word: no. There was no negotiation, no delay, no vague promise to ease the situation, just a firm refusal, and it was this firmness that made the confrontation colder than any argument before it. Why would a man who is said to have pursued Camilla for decades, despite pressure from family and the public, make such a hard decision? The answer, from a strategic perspective, lies in a concept often referred to within the royal circle by a simple word: flexibility. But behind that simplicity is a very clear logic of power. Flexibility means no position is permanent, no role is untouchable, and most importantly, no individual stands above the interests of the entire system. At a time when public trust is becoming a matter of survival, maintaining the ability to adjust personnel at the highest level is essential. A permanent commitment to any individual, even a queen, would mean limiting the ability to respond to unpredictable change. And for King Charles III, who must weigh every move in a highly sensitive period, that is a risk he cannot accept. Subsequent developments have only reinforced this assessment. Within just a few months of the year 2025, more than 30 of the most significant patronages were transferred from Camilla to Catherine. These were not symbolic changes. Each patronage is tied to a network of relationships, a source of influence, and a part of the royal image in the eyes of the public. This transfer, therefore, was not merely a rearrangement of roles. It was a large-scale redistribution of power. What is notable is how this process unfolded. There were no major announcements, no public events to attract media attention. Everything was carried out quietly, step by step, as if to avoid triggering strong reactions from the outside. Yet, it was precisely this quietness that made insiders understand more clearly than ever that this was a calculated decision, not a random change. For Camilla, this meant the gradual loss of her remaining foundations. No longer control over key activities, no longer the ability to build influence through patronage networks, and most importantly, no longer a place in strategic discussions. All that remains is the title. A title that is becoming increasingly detached from real power. Meanwhile, Catherine continues to strengthen her position in a familiar way. No display, no public reaction. Yet every step delivers clear results. She does not need to demand power. Power finds its way to her through what she has already built. And in a system where effectiveness and public trust are the two decisive factors, her advantage is becoming increasingly overwhelming. From an external perspective, this appears to be a nearly completed transition. But on closer examination, what is truly remarkable is not the outcome, but the way it has unfolded. There has been no revolution, no dramatic event, only a series of small decisions, carried out consistently, leading to a major change that by the time it is recognized, is already too late to reverse. At the center of it all, King Charles III remains the one making the final decisions. Decisions that may cost him personally, but are necessary for the survival of the system he leads. This raises a difficult question. Where is the line between emotion and duty? And when the two collide, which one prevails? Cold, decisive, and seemingly irreversible. But why would a man believed to deeply love his wife make such a move? The answer may not lie in the present, but in a shadow that has never truly left this palace for more than 3 decades. There is one thing that, despite more than 3 decades passing, no one in the British royal family can deny. The name Princess Diana has never truly left the walls of Buckingham Palace. It no longer exists as a person, but as a symbol, a collective memory, an invisible measure against which every royal figure that follows is compared, whether they wish to be or not. And within that context, the rise of Catherine, Princess of Wales, cannot be seen as an isolated phenomenon. The public does not admire her only for what she is doing. They admire her because they see in her a reflection of Diana, not imitation, but resonance, a combination of present composure and the emotional memory of the past. Recent surveys show that public approval for Catherine is at approximately 80%, a figure not only high, but surpassing even the peak period of Diana in her final years. This is a turning point, because it reflects not just admiration, but trust. And in a system that depends heavily on image and public support, trust is the most valuable currency. What makes the situation more complex is how King Charles III responds to this reality. For many years, he has been associated with one of the most controversial chapters in modern royal history. The relationship between him, Diana, and Queen Camila is not merely personal. It became a symbol of rupture, of painful choices, and of a deep divide between the monarchy and the public. For that reason, when Catherine emerges as a figure capable of restoring lost trust, many believe that King Charles III sees in her not only the future, but also an opportunity to reconcile with history. This is not a decision officially declared, but when looking at how power is being redistributed, at how responsibilities are gradually transferred, and at the shift in how royal communication shapes public image, a clear pattern can be observed. Catherine is not just given opportunity, she is given trust. And more importantly, she is given a role that no one before her has carried so clearly. The role of a bridge between past and present. Someone capable of bringing healing to wounds that have never fully closed. Meanwhile, Camilla's position becomes more difficult than ever, because no matter what she does, no matter how much she tries to build her image, she faces an unchangeable reality. She is always compared to Diana, and in such a comparison, the outcome seems predetermined, not because Camila lacks effort, but because Diana has become a symbol beyond ordinary standards. This creates a bitter paradox. Camila may have been the one who won the love of King Charles III in real life, but in the eyes of the public, the one who prevailed is Diana. And as Catherine steps forward with an image that evokes Diana, the gap between Camila and public support grows even wider. Some analysts believe that this emotional factor has played a significant role in the king's recent decisions. Not only strategy, not only data, but a deep awareness of how the public perceives the monarchy. And within that perception, Catherine represents hope, while Camilla, fair or not, remains tied to a chapter of the past that many wish to forget, but cannot. From this perspective, the gradual shift of power is no longer difficult to understand. It is not a personal punishment, it is an adjustment to reality. But for Camilla, the feeling may still resemble a delayed consequence, a price paid for choices made many years ago. This story, therefore, is not only about the present, it is an intersection of past and future, between what has happened and what is being built, and at the center of it all are individuals who must face the consequences of both. Looking at the entire picture, it becomes clear that no one truly wins completely. But if there is one person holding the greatest advantage, the answer is evident: Catherine. Princess of Wales not only has public support, she also has the backing of the system. And most importantly, she aligns with the era the monarchy is entering. The game of royal power has never allowed for compromise, and as the curtain slowly falls, what remains is not emotion, but the result of choices that are sometimes cold, yet decisive for the survival of an entire dynasty. And when that curtain finally closes, we will see who is truly the one smiling on the throne. Ladies and gentlemen, looking back at everything that has unfolded behind the doors of Buckingham Palace, one thing becomes clear. This is no longer a story about titles or protocol. This is a transformation of an entire era, where power no longer lies in the crown placed upon a head, but in the ability to retain public trust. Queen Camilla may have achieved what she pursued for many years, an official position beside King Charles III. But in the larger game, where every move carries long-term strategic weight, the advantage appears to lean toward Catherine, Princess of Wales. Because while Camilla wears a symbolic crown, Catherine holds something far more significant: near absolute public support, a network of influence built with persistence, and the trust of the very center of power. One represents the past, with controversies that have never fully settled. The other represents the future, shaped carefully to fit a new era. What is happening shows that the British monarchy is not only adapting, but redefining itself. History is no longer written by unchanging tradition, but by pragmatic decisions, sometimes cold to the point of discomfort. And within that coldness, choices essential to survival are being made. The remaining question is not who is right or wrong, it is what happens next. Will Camilla accept stepping into the shadows? Or is this only the beginning of a deeper and more intense silent struggle than anything we have just witnessed? If you want to continue exploring secrets that have never been revealed, subscribe to the channel now, and do not miss the next video, where we will dive into the secret behind the will of King Charles III, a document that could reshape the entire balance of power in the future. Have you ever wondered why Prince William has been able to stand beside Camilla for all those years with a face that shows almost no emotion, not a single smile, not a single friendly glance, only a composure so controlled it feels cold? That is not forgiveness. It is control. It is the ability to conceal what is truly happening behind the eyes of a future king. In the silent corridors of the palace, where every secret is protected by tradition and power, a rumor has emerged that cannot be verified, yet cannot be silenced. A secret list, 20 things that King Charles III is believed to have taken from Princess Diana. From reputation, public affection, to symbolic status, and then transferred them all to Camilla. What is unsettling is not the existence of that list. It is the fact that William knows it exists. Nearly 30 years have passed since Diana left this world, and the story seemed to have come to an end. but in truth, it was only covered by time. Camila, once criticized, has become queen, a journey many call a victory, yet others believe it is a replacement built upon losses that cannot be measured. And William, the boy who once walked behind his mother's coffin, has now become the center of inherited power. So the question remains, what does all that silence truly mean? If you believe William is acting for justice for his mother, comment number 1. If you believe this is a strategy of power to protect the throne at all costs, comment number 2. Leave your choice below. If there is one thing that can tell the true story of the British royal family without words, it is jewelry. It is power encoded in light. It is history worn on the body. And in the story of Princess Diana, those pieces did not only reflect beauty, they reflected a tragedy taken piece by piece, quietly but deliberately. The public may be used to seeing Camila appear at major events wearing magnificent jewels, but what unsettles observers is not the appearance, it is the origin. Because some of those pieces were once associated with Diana, once an inseparable part of the image of the woman who captured the hearts of the global public, and when those items passed to another person, especially someone who once stood on the opposite side of a fateful marriage with King Charles III. The story is no longer about fashion. It becomes a statement of power. One of the most controversial moments was when Camila wore an emerald brooch, a design once considered a signature of Diana's style. That image did not just spread across headlines, it triggered a quiet but intense wave of reaction. Because for those who understand the symbolic system of the monarchy, this was not coincidence. It was a calculated act, a repositioning of image, a way of saying that history can be rewritten if those in power choose it. Protocol experts have called it a public humiliation, not because of the act of wearing jewelry itself, but because of its context. Diana did not only lose her position within the family, she lost control over her own narrative. And when her final symbols are used by someone else, that is when memory begins to be manipulated. According to unofficial estimates, the total value of the jewelry collection once belonging to Diana, but later redistributed within the royal family, could exceed £100 million. But that number is only the surface. What is truly shocking is how the transfer took place. No clear explanation to the public. No transparent process made known. Everything handled in silence, under the name of tradition and inheritance, and that is exactly what William cannot accept. According to many close sources, William does not see those pieces as assets. He sees them as legacy, as fragments of memory left behind by his mother, and to him, the use of those memories, in a way that diminishes Diana's image, is no different from a systematic erasure. What is notable is that William never reacts publicly, no speech, no direct confrontation. Yet that very silence has led many to believe he is preparing for something greater, a long-term plan, a strategy built not on emotion, but on legitimate power. After taking over the Duchy of Cornwall, the largest financial and influence base for the heir to the throne, William is believed to have begun a comprehensive review not only of financial assets, but also symbolic ones. Among them, Diana's jewelry plays a key role. Lawyers, legal advisors, and royal asset experts have been mobilized not to create a public conflict, but to prepare for an irreversible shift. At the center of that plan is Catherine Middleton, the woman William believes can continue Diana's image in the most natural way, not by imitation, but by inheriting spirit. The transfer of these pieces to Catherine is not only a family matter, it is a political statement, a way to affirm that Diana's legacy will not be erased, it will be reasserted. In a new form, but with the same core value. Yet that creates an underlying tension, because if these plans become reality, it means part of Camilla's current image will be challenged, not directly, not loudly, but enough to reshape how the public perceives her role in royal history. Camilla's silence throughout this period only deepens the mystery. No response. No explanation. Only continued appearances with unchanged confidence, but in a system where every detail is controlled, silence is also a strategy. It can be a sign of confidence, but it can also be a sign of a confrontation being delayed. What makes this story remarkable is not its material value, it is its symbolic meaning. Jewelry in the royal family does not belong only to the wearer. It belongs to the story that person represents, and when that story changes, the entire structure of memory is affected. A former royal aide once said that Diana understood very clearly the power of the jewelry she wore. She chose them not only for beauty, but for message, and that is why seeing those pieces in a completely different context is not just a change of ownership, it is a change of meaning. William understands that, and perhaps that is why he does not rush. He does not need to prove anything immediately, because in a long game, the winner is not the one who reacts fastest, but the one who controls the outcome. And as gemstones continue to reflect light at royal ceremonies, one question still lingers. Who truly owns them? The one who wears them, or the one whose memory remains tied to every detail? But as attention remains fixed on money and jewels, another truth begins to emerge. What was taken from Diana was not only material, something far more valuable was her honor. Something King Charles III used his power to strip from her while she was still alive. And that is the battle William has never truly begun, yet has certainly never forgotten. If jewelry is the symbol of soft power, then titles are power legalized by words. In the British royal family, a title is not just a form of address, it is a position within the system, the right to appear, to speak, to be recorded in history, and that is why losing a title is no different from being erased from a part of oneself. For Princess Diana, the moment she lost the title of HRH after her divorce from King Charles III was not merely a ceremonial change, it was a deep cut into her honor. A cold decision, made not in anger, but through clear political calculation. Heir, or Her Royal Highness, is not simply a title, it is a symbol of position within the royal family. An official recognition that the holder belongs to the center of power. When Diana was stripped of this title, she did not just lose a form of address, she lost the right to stand as an equal within the very family she once represented. And there was one person who witnessed it all, Prince William, only 14 years old at the time, stood watching his mother being pushed out of the circle of power by an administrative decision. According to many close sources, it was not a moment of emotional outburst. There was no public resistance, only a promise spoken very quietly, yet strong enough to shape an entire future. I will give the title back to my mother. A short sentence, but carrying the weight of an oath. Many years have passed, and that promise has never been mentioned again in public. But those who closely follow William's journey all recognize one thing: he has not forgotten, and more importantly, he has not let it go. The rise of Camilla from a controversial figure to queen is one of the most significant shifts in the British royal family in many decades. But what many fail to notice is that her title did not come only from love or public acceptance. It came from a sequence of carefully designed decisions, each step gradually legitimizing her position within the system, and that is exactly what makes Camilla's title a perfect target in a long-term strategy that William is believed to be building. According to experts in royal constitutional matters, a title can be changed by decree of the monarch. No referendum required. No parliamentary approval in every case. This creates a possibility that few had previously considered, that within 24 hours after Charles is no longer on the throne, the successor could sign a decree that completely alters Camilla's position within the structure of power, from queen down to queen dowager. A title that carries more ceremonial meaning than real authority. Associated more with the image of a widow than with the center of political power. 24 hours. a period short enough to avoid a power vacuum, yet long enough to send a clear message that the old order has ended and a new order is beginning. If that were to happen, it would not simply be a change in title. It would be a direct strike at the image Camila has built over many years. From a criticized figure, she gradually regained public acceptance, becoming an essential part of royal activities, but all of that could be redefined by a single symbolic decision. What makes this story tense is not the legal possibility, it is the motive. Is this the way William fulfills the promise he made at 14, or is it a strategic move to consolidate power, removing elements that could affect the image of a new reign? Some analysts argue that these two motives do not exclude each other. In the world of royalty, where personal emotion and political interest often intertwine, a decision can be both personal and strategic. And in William's case, adjusting Camilla's title could be both a way to close an old chapter and to open a new one with clearer rules. But there are also warnings that any change involving titles could trigger strong public reactions, because a title does not only affect the person who holds it, it affects how an entire nation perceives its history, and in an age where media can amplify every detail, a seemingly simple decision could become the center of a global debate. William understands that, and perhaps that is why he has never revealed any intention. No statement, no clear signal, only careful steps, calculated with precision, just as he has done with the issue of jewelry. But unlike jewelry, a title cannot be transferred quietly. It must be announced, it must be recorded, it must be accepted. And that is why, if that day comes, it cannot be ignored. What is notable is that, throughout this entire story, Diana remains at the center, not because she is still present, but because what happened to her continues to influence present decisions. The loss of her HRH title is not just an event in the past, it is a precedent, a reminder that power can be used to elevate someone, and it can also be used to bring someone down. And if William truly chooses that path, he will not only be rewriting Camilla's story, he will be rewriting how the monarchy handles honor, power, and memory. But the biggest question still remains: can justice be carried out through power, or will power, when used in the name of justice, create a new cycle of different injustices? A title can be changed with a single stroke of a pen, but how do you restore a life that has been damaged by the media? The answer lies in how Prince William is controlling the royal information machine. In the British royal family, power does not only lie in the throne, but in the ability to control the narrative. Who gets to tell history? Who is forgotten? Who is protected? And who is turned into a shadow of themselves? For many years, King Charles III is believed to have operated a sophisticated media system where Camilla's image was rebuilt step by step, while Princess Diana's image was gradually reshaped in a direction that served the new order. This was not a loud campaign. There was no official statement declaring that Diana was being discredited, but when looking back at how royal-aligned media changed its tone over the years, a clear pattern begins to emerge. Diana, once a global symbol of compassion, was gradually portrayed as a fragile and vulnerable woman, and in many cases, associated with the image of emotional instability. Interviews, behind-the-scenes stories, analytical articles, all contributed to building a new narrative, where her tragedy was no longer seen as the result of royal pressure, but as a personal issue. In contrast, Camila was elevated as a model of patience and stability, a woman who endured public judgment, yet ultimately stood firm and was recognized. This image did not emerge naturally. It was cultivated over many years, through media resources, strategic relationships with the press, and a system of information control understood only by those inside it. But what the public does not see is the rest of the story, the part that has